We just finished a big picture session on the ebb and flow of economies. In this session of Arctic Frontiers Offstage, I have with me Jacob Bolton, PhD candidate at the London School of Economics, and James Tlen, mechanical engineer and research analyst for Northern Energy Innovation and part of Arctic Frontiers Emerging Leader 2026 program. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Aslaug. Yes.
So to start with you, Jacob, after this session, what was the first thought you had after this? I know that you mentioned the Arctic as a resource frontier. Can you expand upon that?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's more discomfort around that language more than anything. I mean, it's a phrase we've heard a lot throughout the conference, but also kind of heard it in this session. And I guess that I'm mindful of how the way we talk about a region very much shapes how we plan for that region, how we assume things about that region. And it's not true that the Arctic is some kind of untapped resource frontier, right? There's been a lot of resource extraction in the region prior to now. And it's also, if we talk about it as a frontier, it creates this sense of urgency, right? That we must go in and kind of take minerals, take resources, whatever that is. And I just exercise some caution or some wariness around this language because, I think it matters how we talk about places.
But there is some potential for more resource extraction.
Of course, yeah. But I think before resources are extracted, we should also kind of ask how and for who, right? And we should have a plan for that kind of before we go in and take them.
Why do you think we should be careful with using it like that?
I guess if we look at the kind of history of resource extraction, particularly in places where, like in the Arctic, where a lot of that is on indigenous land, the history has been one of, of depletion, of kind of exhausting minerals. And, this also comes back to something else I want to talk about, which is this question of the energy transition, right? You hear this language that, there are these critical minerals, that we need them for the energy transition. And, in the history of energy transitions, energy transitions are always additive, right? We talk about the coal to oil transition that happened in the 20th century, but we burnt more coal last year than any time before. There's no reason to believe that a green transition might be anything different. So I guess my caution would be kind of before we say we need them for the energy transition, we need to think, well, what are we actually doing with this energy? What is it for? And who is it for?
Mm. One thing that struck you, James, after this session was the talk about dual use. Can you explain to us this concept and how it looks like in practice?
Sure, yeah. Dual use infrastructure. It's a big topic, a hot buzzword of the week, I'd say. It basically boils down to infrastructure that serves multiple shareholders. For example, seaport can serve both military and local use. Hospitals serve use for everyone, but maybe houses around military bases really only serve military purposes.
So where do you see, you said that dual use is the buzzword of the week, more or less. We have had many conversations in Arctic Frontiers this week where we have been discussing dual use. But do you see a potential for this dual use to just be used as a word, it's fine to do all of these things because it can be used for good as well? Is there potential for the dual use to be sort of a way out of engaging local communities?
I think if you're going to do dual use properly, there is no ignoring local engagement. So if you don't have that local engagement, then I don't think it's actually going to be a dual use infrastructure.
Do you have anything to add to this dual use? If you use it properly, you can't ignore the local population?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have tons to add. I mean, this point was made that a lot of people living in the Arctic are very, very well aware of what their infrastructural kind of needs are and been calling for this infrastructure for a long time. I would kind of question this logic that the only way to provide infrastructure to the north is for it to be under the guise of also serving a military function or serving something else, because historically that's not been the case, right? That it's only kind of economic activity that can drive infrastructure investment. In fact, it was also mentioned in the panel there was that if there's one thing that COVID-19 taught us, it's that the state can mobilize to provide resources in quite a drastic way when the time comes to do that, okay? And in thinking about these projects like in the Arctic and think about infrastructure needs, maybe there's a need to think about it more as a project of reparation rather than just purely as one of just kind of economic development.
So, James, we touched upon how you think that the government should facilitate the infrastructure development to help the economy. Can you say a bit more what's needed where you're from, the Canadian Arctic?
There's a lot of issues in the Canadian Arctic around clean energy. The majority of all Arctic communities are diesel primary power communities. There is a great demand for renewable integration, but a lot of these communities are poorer, smaller communities, and a lot of the successful projects that I've seen have come out of government initiatives. So I would say more policies around like northern development can only improve those situations.
You mentioned a bit earlier about if you have electric boats, you also need electric chargers. Can you expand a bit upon that?
Yeah, sure. I was just paraphrasing what was said in the session, but the idea is that if you want to have electric boats on the water, you need electric chargers on the shore. If you want to have electric chargers on the shore, you need electric boats in the water. One can't really come before the other, so government policies can be enacted to assist in just technological transformation when it's not going to be feasible to be kind of done on its own.
But there's a lot of things that need to happen at once.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, back to you, Jacob. One of the points that you took after this session was that it's not a rush. You want to tell me a bit more about what kind of rush do you hear about?
Sure. I mean, I think the phrase that was said was like, this is not the Arctic moment. There have been many Arctic moments in the past, and yes, while it's tempting to kind of like capitalize on this moment where like global attention is on the Arctic, probably for all the wrong reasons, right? Like to advance particular agendas and to kind of rush in and do things. It's also important that we think historically and we historicize this, and that we don't, open space for actors to rush in to kind of do things beyond the speed of regulation or beyond the speed of kind of policing or any sort of like oversight, right? I think that's really important. Yeah.
So last question to you, James. What do you feel about this Arctic moment? Is it important not to rush it, or do you think we should grab it with both hands?
I think if the spotlight's on you, you should take it while you can. There are, I think, a lot of responsible ways you can do it, and there are a lot of critical things that need to be done that are maybe being overlooked for the buzzwords and the loud guy shouting in the front row.
The last comment to you, Jacob. We should be careful not to rush this Arctic moment. But if you were to do one thing in this Arctic moment, what would you do?
If I was to do one thing in this Arctic moment, I would... I think history looks very different in the Arctic when you think of the history from the perspective of like indigenous peoples, and probably what I would want to do in that position would be to listen to indigenous folks, to make a platform to actually listen to indigenous folks and to do that seriously and recognize the plurality and diversity of voices, and to think very seriously about like what that history looks like from that perspective.